My name is Darren Cole, and this happened in Houston, Texas, in the kind of neighborhood where everybody grills on Sundays. Everybody knows your business by Tuesday, and somehow nobody ever knows the full truth until it's way too late. My wife, Janelle, liked appearances. She liked polished smiles, matching outfits, curated photos, little speeches about legacy and love. Me? I was rougher around the edges. I talked too fast, got defensive too quick, worked too much, and made mistakes I still regret. But I love that woman for real. So when she asked me to stand in front of our friends and praise her publicly, I did not know I was walking into the ugliest night of my life. Before I tell you what happened, subscribe if you like stories where the truth keeps changing every few minutes, because I'm telling you now, this one did not go the way I thought it would. Not even close. At first, I thought I was the guilty one in our marriage. Years earlier, I had hidden credit card debt from Janelle after my contracting business got shaky. I paid it off, confessed everything, and spent 2 years trying to earn back trust. Counseling, budget spreadsheets, extra honesty, all that. So when she became colder with me later, I told myself maybe I deserved it. Maybe this was still the aftershock. Maybe this was me paying interest on old mistakes. Janelle and I had been married 8 years. She taught middle school English on the South Side, and I ran a small flooring crew with 2 cousins and an uncle who showed up when he felt like it. We had a daughter, Imani, who was 6 and had my eyebrows and Janelle stare when she wanted answers. From the outside, we looked steady. Nice brick house, church on second Sundays, family cookouts, date night pictures every few weeks. But somewhere in the last year, Janelle started acting like she was performing wifehood instead of living it. Everything became a scene. Everything had an audience. Even private apologies somehow turned into speeches about what I needed to learn. That should have been my first clue. See, real healing is quiet sometimes. It's awkward. It stumbles. It doesn't always come with a ring light and a caption about growth. But Janelle loved public meaning. If I bought flowers, she wanted pictures. If I planned dinner, she wanted people to know I had stepped up. And because I did have a past mistake hanging over me, I let it happen. I accepted the role of recovering husband. I told myself humility was part of accountability. Maybe it was, but there's a difference between accountability and being turned into a prop. I didn't know yet which one I'd become. Keep listening, because that difference changed everything. The first strange thing I noticed was her laughter. That sounds stupid, I know, but when you love somebody long enough, you know their real laugh. Janelle had this laugh from the belly, this loud one that made her throw her head back and slap the table. Then she developed a different laugh, smaller and sharper, one she used at her phone. Not with me, at her phone, sometimes late at night, sometimes first thing in the morning. I'd ask what was funny, and she'd say, school stuff, or group chat, or, you wouldn't even know these people. That last one stayed with me. You wouldn't even know these people. I was her husband. Why wouldn't I? Then there was the perfume. Not more perfume, different perfume. Janelle usually wore vanilla and something warm, something soft. One Thursday, she came home smelling bright and expensive, like citrus and cedar, like she had walked through a department store ad. I noticed because I'd spent years buying her fragrances for birthdays and anniversaries, and this wasn't one I recognized. I said, "New scent," and she flinched. Just for a second, but I saw it. Then she smiled too big and said one of the teachers gave her a sample. I said okay. I said it too quickly, like a coward, because deep down I was already scared of what I might find if I stopped saying okay. If you've ever ignored a red flag because you didn't want the answer, go ahead and admit it to yourself right now. I did, repeatedly. I even overcompensated. I started helping more around the house, not because I wasn't already involved, but because I thought maybe the distance was my fault. I packed Imani's lunches, folded laundry while listening to old Maxwell songs, fixed the garbage disposal, planned a family trip to Galveston. Janelle thanked me, but in this cool, formal way, like I was staff. Then she'd post online about partnership and growth and men doing the work. And every post made me feel less like a husband and more like an apology with shoes on. Then came the event. Janelle said she wanted to host a gratitude dinner at our house for close friends and family, just a small celebration because she had been nominated for District Teacher of the Year. I was proud of her, sincerely. I told everybody, ordered extra chairs, borrowed tablecloths from my aunt, smoked ribs in the backyard for 6 hours. She floated through the house, giving instructions, beautiful in this emerald dress, telling me where the candles should go, which playlist felt classy, which serving spoons looked tacky. That part was normal. Janelle could be controlling, yes, but she could also make a room feel special. Still, there was a current in her that night, something electric. Too pleased, too prepared. Right before guests arrived, she touched my arm and said, "And babe, later I want you to say a few words about me." She said it lightly, almost playful, but her eyes stayed fixed on mine just a second too long. My chest tightened. "A speech?" I asked. She laughed. "Not a speech. Just say something nice. You know, about how much I've held us down." Held us down. That phrase again. I joked, "What if I pass out halfway through?" And she smiled without smiling. "Don't embarrass me tonight, Darren." Oof. That hit harder than it should have. Because I realized she wasn't asking. She was staging, and I still didn't know why. People filled the house by 7:30. My cousin Trey brought sweet tea. Janelle's friend Rochelle brought a peach cobbler nobody touched until late because everyone kept saying they were full. Her principal came. Her church friend came. My barber came with his wife because he had known us since before the wedding. Even Janelle's younger brother Stefan, who usually avoided family gatherings, showed up in a crisp white shirt and expensive sneakers that looked cleaner than my conscience. I moved from room to room smiling, checking trays, refilling cups, doing host stuff. But the whole time, I felt like I was walking through a set somebody else had built around a script I hadn't seen. About an hour in, I went upstairs to grab more napkins from the hall closet because somehow we were already running low. That's when I saw Janelle's phone on the bed. Face up, lit screen. And no, I was not one of those husbands who dug through his wife's phone every week. After the debt lie years earlier, I had promised myself I would never become paranoid and sneaky. But the phone was there, glowing, and I looked. I did. I looked because her message preview popped up with one line. "Did he really practice the speech like you said?" LOL. My blood ran cold so fast, I actually grabbed the dresser. "Practice the speech? Like you said?" The contact name wasn't saved as anything obvious. Just one letter. I tapped it. My thumb shook so bad I nearly dropped the phone. The thread opened to months of messages. Not explicit, not filthy, not the kind of thing you can use to convince yourself it's harmless. Worse than that. Familiar. Intimate. Strategic. There were jokes about me. Screenshots of texts I had sent Janelle. Comments about how easy it was to make me feel guilty by bringing up my old financial betrayal. One message said, "He'll do anything now if you frame it as growth." Another said, "Tonight is going to be wild. Don't laugh." I stopped breathing correctly. I forgot how to breathe like a normal person. I scrolled further. There were references to lunches after school meetings, one hotel receipt screenshot, and one message from Janelle that made my knees go weak. He's going to stand there and praise me in front of everybody. He thinks this is about my award. The irony. That word sat on the screen like it was enjoying itself. I wish I could tell you I got angry first, but I didn't. First I felt stupid. Small. Used. Then I felt grief, which is somehow worse because it doesn't give you direction. Grief just hollows you out and lets your body keep moving anyway. And yes, I know I shouldn't have read more, but come on. At that point, what was I protecting? Privacy? The marriage was already bleeding out. And then came discovery number 2, because apparently one knife wasn't enough. A photo attachment loaded from 2 weeks before. Janelle and some man in a restaurant mirror, his hand around her waist, her face tucked against his shoulder. Both smiling like people who didn't have to clean up after the lie yet. I recognized him after a second. Andre Whitfield, assistant principal at her school. Tall, smooth dude, always talking like a leadership podcast. I had met him once at a fundraiser. He shook my hand with both of his and complimented the brisket. In the photo, Janelle wore the same perfume I'd noticed. My stomach turned so hard I thought I might throw up on the carpet. Instead, I locked the phone and just stood there listening to my own heartbeat knock around my ears. That should have been the moment I stormed downstairs, right? Exposed her, kicked people out, smashed something dramatic. But there are 2 reasons I didn't. First, Imani was asleep in the guest room with noise-canceling headphones and a stuffed rabbit, and I was not going to turn her house into a war zone. Second, I saw another text hit the screen. From Andre. Make sure he says what you told me. I'm recording. Recording. That changed everything. This was not just betrayal. It was performance. She wanted proof. She wanted a clip of me praising her while she and her little secret audience laughed at how clueless I looked. That kind of cruelty clears your vision real fast. So I put the phone back exactly where it had been. Then I washed my face, looked in the mirror, and saw a man I barely recognized. Not because I looked broken, because I looked calm. Too calm. My dad used to say real rage can go cold enough to sharpen. I understood him then. I walked downstairs carrying napkins and smiling. Janelle glanced at me from across the kitchen island, searching my face for something. Maybe guilt, maybe obedience, maybe a little fear. I gave her none of it. I kissed her cheek and said, "Everything good, babe?" She smiled in relief. That moment right there, that was the last honest gift she got from me. Subscribe if you want the exact second I decided not to save her from herself. Because up until then, I was still trying to decide whether I wanted justice, peace, or just escape. Then Stefan cornered me near the patio and changed the whole equation. He looked nervous, tugging at his cuffs, not really meeting my eyes. He said, "You good?" I laughed and said, "Why wouldn't I be?" He swallowed. No reason. But he stayed there. Then he leaned in and muttered, "Just don't let her make a fool out of you tonight, bro." I froze. He knew something. Maybe not everything, but enough to say that. Enough to warn me. And suddenly I wasn't the only one being tested. I asked Stefan what he meant, and he backed off immediately. "Nah, nothing, man. Forget I said it." Classic family cowardice. But his face told me plenty. He had that shame people wear when they didn't start the fire, but watched it spread. I didn't push him right then. I couldn't. Guests were laughing in the dining room. Rochelle was asking where the hot sauce was. My barber was calling me chef too loud, and Janelle was glowing at the center of all of it like a woman about to collect an award she thought she had already earned. So I tucked Stefan's warning in my chest next to everything else and went back to pouring drinks like my life wasn't splitting open in real time. Dinner ended around 9. Plates cleared, music softened, people loosened up in that comfortable after-meal way. Janelle tapped her glass with a spoon and stood up smiling. "I just want to thank everybody for coming," she said, all gracious and warm. She gave a little speech about community, faith, perseverance, educators being underappreciated, the village that helped raise and support her. Then she turned toward me and reached out her hand. "And before we cut dessert, I want my husband to say something. Because nobody has seen my journey more closely than Darren." There was scattered applause. My skin buzzed. Across the room, Stefan went completely still. I stood up slowly and heard one person whisper, "Ah." They had no idea. I took the glass from her and smiled. "Yeah," I said. "I can say something." My voice cracked on the second word, which honestly helped because it made me sound emotional for a reason everybody understood. I looked around the room. Friends. Family. People who had watched us build this life. People who had also watched me mess up before and try to fix it. I started gently. I thanked everyone for supporting Janelle, for loving our family, for honoring her work as a teacher. I talked about her discipline, her intelligence, the way she could command a room. All true. That's important. The best revenge starts with truth. People leaned in. Janelle relaxed. And that was exactly when I began. "I've learned a lot from Janelle," I said, "especially about appearances, about how easy it is for people to mistake performance for character, how a polished image can make people assume the heart underneath matches." A few folks chuckled like I was being poetic. Janelle's smile tightened by maybe 1 millimeter. I kept going. She taught me accountability too. Lord knows I needed it. Years ago, I made mistakes with money and trust, and she never let me forget that. I laughed softly, and maybe that was fair. Maybe I needed to live in honesty so long that it stopped being a punishment and became a habit. Now the room was quieter. I heard the ice machine dump a fresh tray in the kitchen. Then I said the line that changed the air completely. What I appreciate most, though, is how committed Janelle is to irony. Nervous laughter. Confused faces. Janelle blinked hard. "Because irony," I said, turning to her, is asking your husband to publicly praise your integrity while your boyfriend waits for the video. Silence. Complete, brutal silence. Somebody inhaled so sharply it sounded like a hiss. Janelle's face drained. She opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. Not dramatic, just steady. No, let me finish. I've had practice listening to speeches about growth. A couple people looked at each other. Andre was not there, but his absence suddenly filled the room like smoke. Janelle whispered, "Darren, stop." I shook my head. I would have. If this was just cheating, maybe I would have walked away and handled it in private for our daughter's sake. But you made it a show. You turned my remorse into a leash, and tonight you wanted a souvenir. I pulled out my own phone then, because yes, after reading her messages, I sent myself the screenshots. Not all, just enough. I'm not going to read everything, because some things are too ugly for company. But I will read one line. My hand trembled, and I let it. Human is stronger than polished sometimes. He'll do anything if I frame it as growth. Rochelle covered her mouth. My barber muttered, "Nah, man." Janelle snapped into defense fast. "You went through my phone? You violated my privacy." That almost worked, too. A few people shifted uncomfortably. So I nodded. Yes, I did. After a message popped up saying, "Did he practice the speech like you said?" I looked, and I'm glad I did, because privacy is not a shield you get to raise around a setup. She started crying then, but not the cracked, involuntary crying of a person suddenly overwhelmed by remorse. This was the crying she used in arguments, the crying that wanted control back. "You're twisting this," she said. "You always twist things." I laughed once. No. Tonight, I finally untwisted one. Then Stefan spoke, and that was discovery number 3. He stood up and said, voice shaking, "He ain't twisting nothing." Every head turned. Janelle stared at her brother like he'd slapped her. Stefan looked sick, but he kept going. "I told you not to do this. I told you months ago this was cruel. I knew about Andre. I didn't know every detail, but I knew enough, and I should have told Darren." My chest sank and rose at the same time. There it was. Confirmation from blood. Stefan wiped his forehead and said, "She said Darren deserved to be humbled because of what happened before. Said public praise would balance the scales." I swear to God, that's what she said. Janelle screamed his name. Too late. Now, here's the part that made the ending ironic in a way I don't think she saw coming. Remember that District Teacher of the Year nomination? It was real. What wasn't public yet was that the district committee had reached out to spouses and colleagues for short written testimonials to accompany the final review packet. Janelle never knew they contacted me because the email had gone to spam, and I only found it the day before while searching invoices. I'd already written mine, honest, glowing, detailed. I planned to send it the next morning. Standing there in that dining room, with her lies hanging all over the ceiling, I realized something. The speech she wanted as a weapon? It had a twin, a document that could either polish her image or leave it nakedly accurate. I looked at the principal, who had gone pale 3 revelations ago, and said, "Don't worry. I'm not here to sabotage her career with personal mess. Teachers matter too much for that." Janelle looked relieved for half a second. Then I continued, "But I will correct the record anywhere I'm asked to speak about character." Relief vanished. See, I wasn't going to send scandal to the district. I didn't need to. That would have hurt students and turned me into the villain she wanted. Instead, I simply deleted the glowing testimonial I had written and replaced it with the most restrained, devastatingly honest note of my life. Janelle is talented in the classroom, but I cannot in good conscience testify to integrity beyond it. That was all. An irony stacked higher still, because the very trait she tried to exploit in me, my willingness to admit my wrongs, became the thing that saved me in a room. I said, "I wasn't a perfect husband. Some of y'all know that. I failed this marriage before in ways that gave her reason to doubt me. I'm not standing here pretending I've always been noble. That mattered. People could feel the difference between confession and manipulation. But I spent years trying to make amends honestly. What I did not do was build a stage out of her guilt and invite spectators." Even Janelle's principal nodded at that. Slowly. He looked heartbroken, but he nodded. Truth has a sound when it lands. It sounds like furniture settling. Janelle tried one last move. She pointed at me and said, "You're only acting calm because you finally got a chance to embarrass me back." I shook my head. No, embarrassment is what happens when truth catches up to a lie in public. Revenge would be me doing to you what you planned to do to me. I set the glass down carefully. I'm not going to perform pain for you. Then I did the cruelest kind thing I've ever done. I handed her the floor. If I'm wrong, I said, explain the messages. Explain Andre. Explain the recording. Explain the line about irony. She couldn't. She stuttered. Started one sentence. Changed nouns halfway. Through. Cried. Blamed stress. Blamed our history. Blamed my insecurity. The room watched her become ordinary. People left in waves after that. Quiet hugs. Awkward goodbyes. Dishes abandoned in the sink. Rochelle squeezed my shoulder and whispered, "I'm sorry, baby," like she had known me since childhood. My barber cursed softly and asked if I wanted him to stay. I said no. The principal left without even taking dessert. Stefan stayed behind and helped gather plates because guilt always won a task. Janelle locked herself in our bedroom. I sat in the den staring at the dark TV while the house made all its little night noises. The vent hum, a faucet tick, a floorboard settling under invisible weight. And then I heard small footsteps. Imani stood there in unicorn pajamas rubbing her eyes, asking if the party was over. That nearly broke me worse than the messages did. I picked her up, held her against my chest, and told her yes, baby, the party was over. She asked why Mommy sounded upset. I said grown-ups were having a hard conversation and it wasn't her fault. She nodded like 6-year-olds do when they understand just enough to be scared. I took her back to bed, tucked the rabbit under her arm, and sat there until her breathing evened out. In the dark, I thought, this is what matters. Not winning. Not humiliating. Not even being believed by everybody. Protecting the one innocent person in this whole house. That thought kept me from doing anything reckless. Anger burns hot. Parenthood burns steadier. Around midnight, Janelle came downstairs barefoot, mascara streaked, that emerald dress now looking like a costume left on after the play was canceled. She sat across from me and started with, "Wasn't supposed to go like this." I laughed in disbelief. No kidding. She said she hadn't meant for it to go so far. Said Andre made her feel seen while she was still angry at me for the financial lies. Said the praised dinner idea started as a joke and then turned into something else. Said she wanted me to understand what powerlessness felt like. That line right there told me everything. This had never been about healing. It had been about rearranging pain until she was the one holding it. I asked her one question. When were you going to stop? Not apologize. Not choose me. Stop. She didn't answer. She looked down at her hands and whispered, "I don't know." There are moments in life when a person tells you the truth by failing to invent a better lie. That was one. I nodded and said, "Then I do." I told her I wanted a separation. Not because I was suddenly fearless. I was terrified of custody schedules, of family gossip, of money, of Imani asking hard questions later. But fear doesn't always mean don't move. Sometimes it means the bridge is real. I said I'd stay in the guest room until we got lawyers and a plan. She cried harder. I stayed seated. Over the next few weeks, more truths came out because lies rarely travel alone. Andre was married too. His wife found out through, well, I shouldn't say karma used my Wi-Fi, but it almost felt like that. He had recorded other women before, sending clips and voice notes to a private group chat full of men who joked about ego management. Janelle wasn't just betraying me with one person. She had joined a whole little ecosystem of smug cruelty built on turning intimacy into content. When Stefan learned that, he cut her off for months. Even her mother, who loved her fiercely, told her, "Pain is not permission." I wrote that line down. Pain is not permission. Might help somebody hearing this now. And the district award? She did not win. I don't know if my revised testimonial changed anything by itself, and I'm not pretending to be the hand of fate. But I do know this. When the committee interviewed community references, they asked whether her public persona aligned with her private treatment of others. For the first time in years, I answered without fear and without decoration. I said she was brilliant, committed, and often inspiring, but currently not someone I would describe as emotionally safe or honest. That's it. No gossip, no details, no spectacle, just the truth, trimmed clean. She lost to another teacher from Westbury, and the woman who loved public praise had to sit in an auditorium and clap for somebody else. That was the revenge, if you want to call it that. Not screaming, not cheating back, not posting cryptic videos. It was this. Janelle built a stage for my humiliation and ended up exposing herself under the exact spotlight she'd arranged. She tried to weaponize my old wrongdoing, but my willingness to own it made her manipulation visible. She wanted me to be the guilty man forever so she could play righteous while doing ugly things in the dark. Instead, the truth forced a clean split between us. I was imperfect in trying. She was polished and pretending. That distinction cost her the story she had written about herself. Nothing is more ironic than a person being undone by their own script. I'm not going to fake nobility and say I was instantly healed after that. Man, please. I was a wreck. I lost weight. Couldn't hear certain songs without getting angry. Read old text threads like a fool looking for clues that had always been there. I kept replaying the dinner in my head, wondering whether I'd been too harsh, too public, too calm, too something. Healing is annoying like that. It keeps asking you to review footage from a game that's already over. But every time I started doubting myself, I remembered the line about recording, the line about irony, the line about how I'd do anything if framed as growth. Then the doubt would burn off again. The strangest part? I actually became a better man after the marriage ended. Not because betrayal improved me, but because it removed the theater. I didn't have to perform repentance for somebody who had stopped valuing honesty. I just had to live honestly for myself and for Imani. I took financial classes, expanded my business carefully, went to therapy without trying to sound wise in there. Some sessions I just sat down and said, I still feel stupid. And my therapist would say, stupid people don't usually examine themselves this hard. That helped. So did Trey, who never let me spiral too long before dragging me to a Rockets game or making me help with his fence. Men need work and witness both. A year later, I saw Janelle at a Monty school play. She looked beautiful, tired, older around the eyes. We spoke politely. That's all. No reunion music. No cinematic hatred either. Just two people standing where their choices had placed them. She said, "You were right that night." I didn't smile. I didn't punish her with silence. I just said, "I know." Then I watched our daughter walk on stage dressed as a sunflower, wobbling slightly, grinning into the lights like none of our adult disasters could touch her for those 3 blessed minutes. That was enough for me. More than enough, actually. Sometimes closure is not a speech. Sometimes it's your child being safe while the worst chapter finally stays in the past. So if you're listening to this because the title sounded messy, here's the real lesson underneath it. Betrayal hurts, yes, but the deepest wound sometimes isn't the cheating. It's the redesign of your reality. It's finding out someone studied your remorse, your soft spots, your efforts to improve, and turn them into tools that can make you question everything. Don't let it. If you've done wrong before, own it. Make amends. Grow for real. But never let another person use your growth as handcuffs. Accountability is supposed to free you into better character, not trap you under somebody else's ego. Phew, sorry I said that fast. But I meant every word of it. And that's why when people ask me what happened, I don't say, my wife cheated. That's true, but it's incomplete. I say, my wife tried to make me praise a version of her that didn't exist. Because that was the real insult. She wanted worship without truth. Applause without character. A husband as a mirror, not a partner. And when the mirror finally reflected what was actually there, she called it cruelty. Nah, truth is not cruelty just because it arrives on the same night you plan a lie. If you made it this far, subscribe because I tell stories for people who know life gets ugly, but dignity can still survive it. Mine did. Barely at first, but it did.